Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. And joining me today in the co-captain's chair, we haven't seen him here on the channel in a bit, but all the way from Israel, Ben Dudai. What's going on, Ben?
Hey man, how you doing? Yeah,
Doing
great to be
good.
here. Let's talk about some Obscura.
That's right. He's even got the shirt and everything. Very cool.
Sure.
He's got
Yeah.
Sabbath and Priest looking over his shoulder in the back. Love it, love it, love it. So Ben and I have been talking for quite a while about doing this particular show, and I think it's actually good that we waited a little bit because, of course, they did release a new album not that long ago, and the fact that we waited kind of gives the opportunity to get a little bit more used to their most recent album and now fully look at all six albums. So for those who don't know who Obscura are and are watching this, they are probably the preeminent technical progressive death metal band on the planet right now, and probably have been since they first came on the scene roughly 15 or so years ago. And they are from Germany. They've had lots of
hmm
lineup changes, but they do have a couple members who are kind of like, there's one guy in particular who is their guitar player and vocalist, who's been he's been the one constant throughout their career. They have a few other musicians who have kind of come and gone in the band, but when they're in the band, they make up the classic lineup of the band. So, and we'll talk about all these guys as we kind of go through the album. So, six albums in total. Debut came out in 2006. We're going to rank them as we like them. And just remember, Ben and I have not compared notes. I don't know how he's ranked them. He doesn't know how I've ranked them. I will say, in kind of revisiting this catalog again over the last couple of weeks, not a lot separates some of these albums. So this was kind of difficult. And if we were to come back in a month and do it all over again, I might even rank them a little bit differently because a good chunk of them are of equal outstanding quality. And for those who might be watching and have issues with kind of death metal growls, and I know we have plenty of those people, I would say give these guys a try because the music is so sophisticated. And we'll talk about that as we kind of go through here. So I'll stop there. And Ben, I don't know if you want to, before you start off with your number six, I don't know if you have any final words before we dive in here.
No, not really. Just to reiterate what you said, they are sort of helmed by their main man, Stefan Kumera, and but I always think of them as almost like besides him, they're almost like a super group. Every time they have a lineup, they bring in these other musicians who have all sort of made their mark somewhere else as well, and it really shows in the music. It's really fantastic, and as you said, really sophisticated stuff. They were founded in 2002, originally called Illegimitation. It's a weird name. I looked it up and I couldn't find any meaning for it, so I think it's maybe lost in translation there. But and they eventually, when they were recording their debut album Retribution, they took on the name Obscura from one of their favorite bands, Gorguts, from that bizarre album. But yeah, nonetheless, Gorguts are pretty influential.
Yeah, that I personally like that album quite a bit, but it is a little weird, right? Yeah,
It is, yeah. No, it's good. It's great. Gorguts is great.
yeah.
So should we launch into it? What do you say?
Launch into number six. There you go.
Okay, so well, I'm going to come in at number six with the debut Retribution. I feel like this album, they hadn't really discovered the true Obscura sound yet. They were very much still a straightforward death metal band, drawing on influences like from the New York scene and from the Swedish scene. And that being said, the technicality is still there. There's still some very technical and impressive stuff, but it's much more familiar sounding. It definitely, you can hear the influences it's drawing from. Many people compare them to Death, especially this point. I don't really see that myself. Maybe that's because they did a cover of Lack of Comprehension on this album, which is great. But yeah, it's a strong album, and they don't really have any weak albums, I don't think. But it just pales in comparison to the rest of their stuff. Here you had this is before what people think of as the classic lineup. So you had Marcus Lemsch on guitars and vocals, apart from Stefan, of course. He had Jonas Fischer on bass and Jonas Baumgarty on drums and cello. And they had a bunch of other sort of guest appearances as well on that album. But yeah, that's going to be number 6 for me.
It's also my number 6. It's actually the only one I don't own. I thought I bought it at some point, but I never did. But I've heard it many, many times and revisited again doing this. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything you said. I don't know how much more I can add there, but it's definitely, and I like what you said, how it's still fairly technical, but not kind of in the way that they would go on with their next album. I think once they started adding like jazzy guitar soloing or fusion guitar soloing and the fretless bass, and another element was added to their music, and that's kind of missing here. And you mentioned something very key, that this album is very much in the style of the classic, like early 90s New York death metal bands. I hear a lot of early Suffocation on this album as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that. I don't hear much death here at all. I think that the death comparisons kind of come later on a little bit, when they start to get more technical, more jazzy and experimental. So you've got, Death and Cynic and whatnot, those influences coming in. But there are some really good songs on here. I think Nothing is a great song with some killer riffs and insane drumming. None Shall Be Spared is excellent. Sentiment is really good. And I like the longer tracks on this album, because this album has like a few, like maybe 3 or 4, and long meaning 5+ minutes, right? And
I think like you've got like Hymn to the Nocturnal Visitor. I think is one of those.
Yeah,
that's a great one as well. Yeah, but the other ones you mentioned are great as well. Humankind, the opener is really cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
It's good. It's good quality death metal. You can't go wrong with this album. It's certainly not bad, but it's just not really Obscura as we're going to come to know it.
I think for anybody watching, if you've never heard this band before and you were to listen to Retribution and then listen to any of their other albums, you might not even know it's the same band, because there are lots of differences here. There's a sophistication that comes in starting with the next album that's not quite on this album, but as a good, and I know people who like this album better than all their other albums because they like that less technical, old school mentality of death metal, and I can't really find fault with that, because there's nothing wrong with it at all. But I think this album, and specifically on some of those longer tracks on here, hints at what's to come, whereas the shorter pieces are much more kind of in your face, straightforward, brutal death metal songs that are very reminiscent. You mentioned the Swedish scene and the New York scene, and that's very, very true. Not so much the Florida stuff. I think the Florida influences come in starting on the next album. So let's move on to number 5 then.
Okay, so I think my list is probably going to be a little bit controversial, because I see it a little differently to most of the people I've talked to about Obscura. But with that being said, number 5 is going to be Cosmogenesis. I know I've had a lot of people tell me this is their favorite album. There we go. It's a great album. It really is. It's this is where you have the classic lineup come into the band. Actually, I think it was when they were touring Retribution that they had Hannes Grossman, the drummer, who's originally from Necrophagist, and Jeroen Paul Fesseling, the bass player who was originally from Pestilence, joined the band. And then in February the next year, they had Christian Maunsner join the band. And that's when you really see this is the what most people consider to be the best and most classic lineup of the band. And immediately you see the influences of these guys on the music, because all 3 of those guys are, musicians at the very top level of their respective instruments. These guys are all music students. They've all studied. They're all composers in their own right. And you can see that when they and Stefan is as well. He's also studied music. But when you see this grouping come together, the composition explodes, and they just reach into a whole new bag of tricks, into jazz and a technicality that they really hadn't quite been able to master on Retribution. And a lot of that comes from the amazing bass work and the stellar Christian Mounsner guitar playing, who, last time we spoke, I sort of, gave him a lot of props, and that's because he's one of my favorite guitarists. Yeah. The guy is absolutely awesome. And, he came from Necrophagist as well, but also Spawn of Possession, and he's gone on to do a million other things. And Hannes Grossman, he's also gone on to do a million other things. Jerome Thesseling, came from Pestilence. So this is when it becomes kind of like the supergroup, like I was talking about before. And, with songs like Anti-Cosmic Overload, that cool bass run at the beginning of that song. And yeah, like you mentioned before, it's so important. The fretless sound, the fretless bass sound is such a cornerstone of this band. And it's so distinctive, and it's been copied ad nauseum since these guys. You've got Universe Momentum, Desolate Spheres, awesome song. New Spheres and Centric Flow are probably my favorites from this one. Awesome album.
I would agree. More on that in a little bit. I'm going to go with number 5. I'm going to go with Akroasis from 2016, their 4th album. And again, I got to reiterate, all these albums are really, really good. So just because some may be down on the list doesn't mean we don't like them, and they're amazing. And I would say anybody watching who's going to be like, well, where should I start here? Start with any of them, right? So to me, a lot of lineup changes, like in between, and you got we'll get into it with like when people come and go in the band, but here again you got another couple new guys in the band. I think to me there's a slight drop off in quality on this album and a little bit of sameness setting in, but I still think it's an incredible album. And here you have a complete change in lineup. So you got Tom Geltschlager on guitars, you got Linus Klausnitzer, I hope I'm saying these names right, on bass, and Sebastian Lanzer on drums. Lots of intense songs on here. The arrangements are, as always, very complicated, and a blending of the brutality and the melodic. To me, though, Christian and Jeroen are really missed on here, I think. But there's still some really great songs.
Interesting.
Yeah. Sermon of the Seven Sons, nice mix of the brutal and the melodic, jazzy parts. The Monist also does both really, really well. I think the title track is amazing. It's got some blazing lead guitar and bass. The drums are off the chart, and I absolutely love the 15-minute Welt Seal, which takes you on all sorts of twists and turns. And it's what I love. I'm a big prog guy, right? I like when an extreme metal band can create a big epic song like that and keep it interesting for the whole way. And I think they totally do that on that one. So I think it's a fun, really good album. I just don't like it as much as some of the other ones in my list, like the top 4. But Ben, if you have this really high on your list, I couldn't argue that at all, because it's a very good album. I just like the other ones a little bit more. That's just what it comes down to. And I think I've grown to really, I have an affinity for have certain guys in this band, and when they're there, I tend to gravitate towards the music a little bit more. And to me, this lineup on this album, which was the only album where this lineup was together, to me, it's not quite hitting the really, really high marks as some of the other albums, but it's still an incredible album. So that's my number 5.
Yeah, cool. More on that later. So for me, my number 4 is Omnivium. So this was like a continuation of the Cosmogenesis. There we go. Again, the cool thing with these guys is that, as well as the music being very sophisticated and complex and interesting, also the lyrical content is pretty cool. Stefan Kumera is really into a lot of the German philosophers like Schopenhauer and Goethe and others as well, and he brings a lot of that sort of stuff into the lyrical content. And on this particular album, he's mostly drawing on Frederick Schilling's book on nature's connection to the spirit world. And again, this is the direction shifts slightly musically here on Omnivium, although I think not in a huge way. It's basically like they take what they did on Cosmogenesis and refine it and streamline it, and it's sort of it's just the more perfected version of it, in my opinion. And this is actually the point where I came into the band, when I first heard them, and I just remember being blown away. You know, every single guy shines on this album. The songs are really catchy and memorable, that, you know, which is a funny thing to say about any death metal, but
I know, yeah,
death metal,
it's true.
it can be catchy. It can be, you know, people don't realize it. You know, I think one of the things that really highlights the skill that we're talking about here is, you know, they tackle a cover of Cacophony's song Concerto on the end of the album, and you know, that just shows you the level that Christian Mountain is playing at, that he can handle both the solos of Jason Becker and Marty Friedman, you know, and you know, have no problem with it because he's doing it all by himself, of course.
Yeah.
You know, songs like Septuagint and Vortex Omnivium, Ocean Gateways, awesome. Prismal Dawn, Celestial Spheres, that's a great song. Awesome stuff. Great album. And, you know, like I can totally understand. I know a lot of people rate this as their number one, and I can totally understand that. I love this album too, but I just prefer some others.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. Yeah. All right, my number 4 is Cosmogenesis.
Okay.
Second album, first album for Relapse Records. For me, I heard this one first. This is I when this first came out, I got this when it first came out, and I was like, holy cow. And then I went and listened to the debut, and I was like, wow, that's quite different. This you know, this is a huge leap in creativity. The songwriting, the arranging, the whole thing. And again, you've got, you know, Christian comes into the band. He comes over from Necrophagus, so he's already well versed in playing this style of death metal. You know, you got Stefan leading the charge. You got, you know, Jeroen Paul Thesseling coming into the band. You got Hannes Grossman coming into the band. To me, this is the classic lineup of the band. But man, from the first song, Anti-Cosmic Overload, you hear the differences automatically. It's just like it's a different band. The arrangements have gotten more complex and melodic. Christian is a stunning lead guitar player. I mean, I can't stress that often enough. I mean, you know, you mentioned it before. He's one of the greats of this of extreme metal, and he can do other things as well. He's not just a death metal guy, but man, just like sweep picking and just these breathtaking like fusion lines. And I mean, he understands prog, and you know, the riffs on this album are great. But Choir of the Spirits rules. To me, sounds like a collision of like classic Cynic death. You got the breathtaking lead guitar work on Universe Momentum, the bass and guitars on Orbital Elements, the instrumental. I would love to hear this band do more instrumental stuff, to be honest with you, because I think that they could probably do an all instrumental album and it would be just absolutely amazing. Title track is totally crushing. Centric Flow is proggy, intricate, and all these cool layers. I think it's a great album. I listened to this a ton when it came out, but strangely enough, the band would only get better from here. This album is so good. The fact that it came in at my number 4 is almost killing me, because for years this was my favorite. But they keep getting better, and the more you listen to some of these albums, you're like, man. And I do have to stress, because I always we talk about this a lot here on the channel, but I love the fact that they have a actual logo that they use on all the albums, and it's been constant throughout their career, right? Exactly. So that's such a cool thing, because so many bands just throw whatever out there, and every album's got a different logo. It's like, come on, guys. So I love the fact that they do that. So anyway, great album covers on these, and you know.
Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, the one thing that we should mention as well is that run of albums from Cosmogenesis, Omnivium, Akroasis, and Diluvium, they're a 4-part series of conceptual ideas based on all this sort of philosophical stuff, and you know, the formation of the universe and the evolution of mankind and all of this kind of stuff. So that's actually like a 4-album cycle, and you can see it in the artwork as well. It's all sort of similarly themed.
Yeah, and at the end I'll throw that up there so everybody can see it. But no, you're absolutely right. I should have mentioned that before. So yeah, it's a whole long concept. So good point.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So my next one is coming in at number 3 is going to be their latest album, A Valediction. Here we got, yeah, cool album cover there too, actually.
Yeah, Nuclear Blast record down
Th-
this. So most of these are on Relapse, but they're on Nuclear Blast now.
right, right. Um, this was like a sort of a reconnection, reconnecting to some of the older members here. So after they'd done a couple of albums with some of the other lineups, we got Jeroen Paul Thesseling back onto the bass, and of course Christian Maunsner. One of the reasons that he left the band, Christian, in the first place is that he actually suffers from focal dystonia, which is a condition that it's like it has a problem sending electrical signals to the hands. And there's actually quite a few musicians who suffer from this. And one of the ways they get around it is by wearing a glove, and that kind of tricks the brain into letting the hand do what it needs to do. So he was actually really struggling with that when they were touring from Omnivium, and that's why he sort of dropped out to try and sort that stuff out, and also go off and do his own things. But thankfully he's got that under control, and he's back and sounding as amazing as ever, like better than ever, really. The guy just keeps getting better. They brought in, they couldn't get Hans Grossman back, and I think that's because I've seen articles where he kind of was ripping on Stefan a little bit, saying that he's not so great to work with, and that he takes a lot of credit for other people's compositions. Who knows how much of that is true, but I get the feeling there's a little bit of bad blood there. So Hannes Grossman hasn't come back, but you've got David Diepold, who's done various other things. I think he's on the latest Behemoth album as well.
That could be.
Yeah. Anyway, great album. The production is killer. It's sort of they sort of tap back into that Omnivium style, but also incorporating some of the more progressive elements that they developed on the next couple of albums. But also it sounds to me like that Christian especially has brought in some of the influences that he's been doing, like from his other projects. There's sort of little moments that almost sound a little power metal-y in there, and there's even some on one of the tracks there's some clean singing. Although what's interesting is that Stefan always has sort of done this vocoder, voice affected kind of singing, which I think sounds great in this band. But on this album, he doesn't really do much of that. Yeah. And he's got this weird thing where he's like, his growl sounds different too. He's kind of got this little high inflection on the end of each growl. I don't know if you noticed that. It's kind of strange. I don't know why he's doing that, but that being said, I think this is an evolution. I think they've moved forward from those original 2 albums that these guys did together, and this is the growth. This is showing you more of what they can do. Some great songs here. I could really name the whole album because it's all great, but Forsaken is a killer song. When Stars Collide, In Unity absolutely rips. Devoured Usurper, killer stuff. The Beyond, Orbital Elements 2, even better than the original, I think. The Necromancer and In Adversity, all killer stuff. But really, you can pick any song from that album. It's a great album.
I would agree. It's my number 3 as well.
Yeah. There you go.
Everything you said, I absolutely agree with. I kind of like that he mixes up his vocal style from album to album a little bit. And that's one of the things I always liked about Death and Chuck Schuldiner. I mean, he also, throughout the career of Death, his vocals sound a little bit different from album to album, all really good. And I think that he's doing that as well. So I give him a lot of props for that. I also agree that there is like there's almost like a speed metal element to a lot of this album. Like this, to me, this album is much more ferocious, in your face, nonstop, from start to finish, where, you know, some of the other albums have like peaks and valleys as far as mood and tempos and things like that. This album is just like, man, they're just like it's almost like they had something to prove on this album. It's like, you know, we got the boys back in the band. We're going to come out and rip your face off. And that's kind of what this album is. It still has all of the little nuances and the sophistication, and Christian is just shredding away on this album. I mean, it's so good, but there's an intensity to this album, like a nonstop ferocity that I don't think we get on a lot of the other albums. And again, it's kind of speed metal, fast power metal-y in spots, and that's not a bad thing, I don't think. I love this album. I think it's really good. This album might even creep up higher for me as time goes on. I think because we've only had this album for, you know, about a year, and we have a lot more history with the other albums. But, you know, number 3 is high for a very recent album for a band that's been around as long as these guys have. So if anybody wanted to, you know, is wondering where to start with this catalog, and you wanted to start here and go back, I couldn't argue that at all. This is dynamite. Really, really good. And I think David Diepold sounds fantastic on it. Really, really great drumming on this album too.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. It is a great play. It's just as good as any place to start, I think. It's, you know, because it does sort of show all the facets of these guys. And so it's a killer album. And yeah, as you said, Christian really is the star of the show on this one. I mean, he's just blazing all over this thing. And you know what's funny? I actually noticed, if you listen carefully, there's a few moments where they chuck in some Megadeth riffs that I can't remember which song it is, but there's actually a part and it's like, oh, that's Megadeth. But like it's, I think they're doing it on purpose as a little, you know, nod to that style. So I think, yeah, maybe Stefan was digging on some thrash and speed metal when writing this one.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah,
it's a killer album.
Killer. Okay, so this is my top 2 were easily my top 2. I really love both these albums, and I was pretty clear about which was 1 and 2, but just listening to them again today, it's kind of messed me up. But I'll stick with it. I'm going to say number 2 is Akroasis. That is the album that they put out in 2016. You got it there? Yeah, great. I love that album cover too. I think that's my favorite.
Amazing. Yeah, all these album covers are really cool.
Yeah. So here you had, as you said, you had Linus Klasnitzer on the bass, who is an awesome bass player. I think he gets a little bit overlooked when people talk about this band because, you know, Jeroen Paul Fesseling is such a beast. But I think I actually prefer Linus because he's a bit more understated at times, but he can unleash as well. And I like his tone a little bit better. Jeroen's tone is a little woody at times, but yeah, I mean, it's minuscule, you know, I love them both. Sebastian Lanzer comes in on drums. He's from Panzer Ballet, which is a German jazz metal band. And really, I actually much prefer his drumming to Hannes Grossman, actually.
Wow.
And the combination of him and Linus together, I think, are such a powerhouse rhythm section. I find that I actually prefer them in Obscura than Hannes Grossman and Jeroen, because they seem to me tighter, and they also seem to pull off these complex things in much more of a unison sort of way. Much more, it just feels like it's like they've taken the lessons that were laid down to them by the previous guys and perfected it, at least to my ears anyway. And on this album, of course, you mentioned him as well, Tom Geldschlager, which has got to be the most German name ever. He's known as Fountainhead. That's his sort of, stage name, Fountainhead. And if you've ever heard any of his solo stuff, you can hear where songs like Weltseal come from. That's very him. That's very his thing. And he plays a lot of fretless guitar. And so he brought that into this album as well. And actually, that's kind of what led to the problems with Stefan. And there was a big drama between him and Stefan. And he was fired from the band after this recording, like sort of unceremoniously. And it led to this years long now sort of feud between them, which is, you know, played out on Facebook and other places like that, and in the media. And I was actually, when I heard this album, you know, of course I was disappointed when Christian left, but when I heard it, I was like, wow, this guy, you know, Fountainhead, he's amazing. He's an amazing guitarist. And I looked at his other stuff, and he is really fantastic. So if people out there want to find something that's you know, if you want to hear like Welt Seal but an instrumental version of it, you should check out his solo stuff, Pete, because I think you might like it. It's very progressive. It's very, he draws on sort of world music and fusion and just really cool, really interesting, especially with the fretless guitar. You know, it's a really different sort of tone.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
You know, some of the like one of the reasons I love this album so much is that, like, I actually find that the songs on this album are, out of all their albums, are the most memorable to me. They're the ones that I find myself humming and singing to myself. Sermon of the Seven Sons is such an epic song. It's just, wow, it just comes out and kicks you in the face. Akroasis, like you said, the lead guitar lines in that are, you know, just all these sweeps and tapping and crazy shit that Tom pulls off. Ode to the Sun is an interesting one because Tom didn't actually play on that track. And, you know, people sometimes rip it because there's no proper solo, and Stefan does this lame solo in it. But the rhythm section on that song absolutely kills. And Stefan's melodic vocals are just so catchy, and it feels so epic to me. I love it. Absolutely love it. Fractal Dimension, Perpetual Infinity, and of course, like you said, Welt Seal is a 15-minute epic. It's a saga and an amazing piece of work. So yeah, I highly recommend this album, and it's my number 2.
Cool. My number 2, which I think I know where it sits on yours, is Diluvium.
Yeah.
Again, another one-off lineup on here, but I mean, this is killer. First and only album with Rafael Trujillo on guitars. He's incredible. Yeah, I mean, there's some great songs on here. Clandestine Stars has those kind of like vocoder vocal things going on there, and they're on a number of songs on this album, and it's
actually, I think it's on most of them actually.
Yeah, I think so. For those of you who like that sort of thing on those old classic Cynic recordings, you know, the debut and certainly their reunion album, you'll love this because it's all over the place. It adds like this weird kind of spacey sci-fi kind of element. Emergent Evolution has them as well. There's a lot of cool atmospherics on this album. There's like strings and almost like some of the lead guitar parts have a very like synth type of sound to them, right? And I think out of all their albums, this is the one that's got, it's kind of like got this kind of like cyber metal feel to it, and I think that's really, really cool. The title track has these like amazing neoclassical guitar lines on it, just absolutely amazing. Mortification of the Vulgar Son, heavy, yet it's also majestic and melodic. The lead guitars are just breathtaking on this album. You know, if it wasn't for Christian, I would say that this album has some of the best lead guitar work in the catalog, but you know, I'm not actually going to say that, but it's amazing. Ethereal Skies is like uber technical, but like in certain spots, just some of the lead work and some of the arrangements are just like, you know, mind blowing. And then, you know, also on that song, you've got these the clean vocoder vocals, which again are really cool sounding, and they use them really well. And there's a lot of cool fretless bass on this album. It's a really, really strong album. And again, I couldn't argue it being number 1. Obviously, Ben, take it from there, but you know, it's a dynamite.
Yeah, everything you just said. I mean, it is my number 1. And you know, it's funny because it's the only album with Rafael Trujillo. But I think that combination, those 3 guys, Sebastian Lanza, Linus Klasnitzer, and Rafael Trujillo, obviously they work so well together because they've gone off now and formed the new band Obsidious, which just released their new album just recently, and it's very similar. And like a lot of the material is very similar to this album. but they've got also power metal vocals in there and growls and all sorts of stuff. It's a bit more progressive. I really love the precision of Rafael Trujillo. He plays the most intricate, high-speed lines and riffs, yet it's just nailed to perfection. You know, if you watch this guy do playthrough videos and stuff like that, it's absolutely, he does not like have, it's like he's incapable of making a mistake. You know, it's amazing to watch him. And I really, really, really love his influence on the music itself. And you can hear it in songs like Ethereal Skies, which just is so epic, you know.
Yeah.
When it does that thing where he's doing like those I can't sing it, but anyway, it does these like runs on the guitar, and then like the strings are going with the guitar. It's just so epic and powerful, and it's really unusual for Obscura to have that sort of the strings in there as well, that sort of almost symphonic thing, but it's done so well. Clandestine Stars, amazing. As you said, the title track Diluvium, yeah, those neoclassical lines, I mean, it's amazing. And of course, the thing that I love about this particular lineup is like what I said about Sebastian Lanza and Linus Clausen, so the bass and drums being so tight together. Here, when you've got Rafael, who is also such a tight player, I feel like they're just at their most in sync. This is them at their most I don't know. It's like in a way they're almost like an Obscura cover band that does Obscura better than the original Obscura, at least for me anyway. That's kind of how I see it. And yeah, love it. Love this album, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a great one for sure. Well, my number one, obviously, for those watching, you probably process of elimination, right? Omnivium, third album from 2011. Love this. Love the cover. And again, I'll show all these kind of like next to each other so you can see how great the artwork is. But you know, somehow, and I remember when this album came out, I was thinking, wow, you know, Cosmogenesis was just so mind-blowing. I'm like, there's no way they can top that. And then this came out. I'm like, somehow they did it. It's got the same lineup, which is really cool. Great songs on here. Songs are getting a little longer, a little more intricate, still brutally heavy. And not a weak track to be found on here, you know, Septuagint or however the hell they say that. It's got some lovely guitars in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, kaboom, you know, the big insane technicality comes in and the brutality kicks in. Cool, you know, use of clean vocals on this album as well. Not a lot of it, but they do utilize from time to time. Vortex Omnivium is just crushes. The lead guitar work on this whole album is mind-blowing. Ocean Gateway is kind of like an ode to their first album. I think that's kind of like real old school death metal there. But Euclidean Elements is just crazy complex. Prismal Dawn, Avum. I mean, every song on here to me is just great. And it's my number one. I love it.
Yeah. You can't go wrong with Omnivium, and you really can't go wrong with any of them. And I would say that, you know, if you're looking for a starting point, unless you really love the brutal death metal stuff and you want that sort of style and you're not really into the progressive stuff, then you can have the first album. But any of the others after that, you know, Cosmogenesis on up, any of those are good places to start with this band. Yeah.
You give everybody a flavor of these album covers, which are just, you know, just amazing.
Yeah.
Even the reissue of the debut Retribution, because the original album cover kind of sucks, but as soon as they got signed to Relapse, they reissued the debut album and they gave it a new album cover art, and that's amazing. That's amazing. I got to get that. I don't know why I don't have it. I could have sworn I bought that at some point a couple of years ago, and maybe I didn't. I don't know, but I need to rectify that. But because you got to have
it. You know, it's funny. I for a long time I was more into the technical and progressive end of death metal, and in recent, like this year especially, I've sort of gone back into more of the sort of classic straight ahead death metal stuff, like, you know, Immolation and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And so listening to that album now, revisiting it, I actually like, damn, this is actually really good. You know,
it is.
So if that's what you're looking for, you can't go wrong with that album. But I say Diluvium, go get it.
Yeah, any of these are really good. So for those watching, you got 6 albums to go check out. If you are a fan already of Obscura, rank them as you like them down below, down there somewhere in the comments. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer. These are all really cool albums. So a great band, and hopefully we'll get something from them in the not too distant future. It's already been about a year, so we'll see what they got cooking. So I want to thank Ben for putting his list together and coming on the show today. He will be back, I believe, next month. We haven't set a date yet, but Ben and I also are going to be tackling the catalog of Cynic in the not too distant future. So, and Ben, you interested in doing Spawn of Possession? It's only 3 albums.
Yeah, let's do Spawn of Possession for sure.
Okay, cool. So there you have it. So
That's
Cynic and Spawn of Possession will be coming in the not too distant future. One legendary band, one band not all that different from Obscura. They've only got 3 albums. I'm not even sure if they're still together anymore.
No,
but 3 great technical, brutal death metal albums that I like quite a bit. So so stay tuned for that. And Ben, you want to plug anything? I know you got a YouTube channel as well. You want to give a plug to that?
Yeah, I've got my YouTube channel called The Metal Spotlight. You know, doing album reviews and doing, you know, albums ranked, and I also have a series where I'm doing like epochs of greatness, where I look at particular bands when they've had a fruitful run of albums, you know, maybe 4 albums in a row or more that are something special, and I'll sort of do a little deep dive into that era. So stuff like that. I just posted a Bloodbath review of their latest album, Survival of the Sickest, which is killer death metal, and also did a video about in honor of Creator's classic album Coma of Souls having its 32nd birthday. So just a little bit of a album review of that amazing album as well. That's actually my favorite Creator album.
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah, I'm just thinking, God, 32 years. No,
yeah,
I know. Possible.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, let's not think about that.
Yeah, and you of course you can see Ben's written reviews on seatranquility.org all the time. He's one of our resident extreme metal writers on the channel. So Ben's laying down the metal on SOT. So look for that as always. And yeah, so there you have it, everybody. That's it for us for today. That's a wrap. And thanks for spending some time with us on this Sunday morning. We'll see hopefully all of you tomorrow as we kick off the work week with the Hudson Valley Squares tomorrow night. So this is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together.
Oh, all the damn time.
There you go. For Ben Dudai, I'm Pete Pardo. Have a good rest of your weekend, everybody. We'll see you real soon. Take care.